Hey, Biddy, I have a question for you. I think you've listened to enough interviews. Do you know what the answer is to tell me about a time you handled a conflict with a colleague? I'd like to get your insight on this. Tell me about a time you handled a conflict with a colleague. It's the question that makes even seasoned professionals sweat. Your palms get clammy, your eyes dart around the room, and suddenly you feel like you're 7 years old trying to explain to a teacher why you pushed Tommy on the playground. Why do we hate this question? Because we've been conditioned to believe that conflict is bad, that having conflict means someone messed up. And so, what do most candidates do? They give me a sanitized Hallmark movie version of events where they were the rational hero and the other person was a chaotic villain. And through the sheer power of logic, they were able to win the argument. Look, I've sat in on enough hiring loops to know exactly when a candidate loses the room. If you tell me a story about how you crushed a colleague with data and proved them wrong, you really haven't impressed me. In fact, you've made me concerned. Because I'm picturing the scorched earth that you're going to leave behind in the organization. Today, we're doing some high-level coaching. We're going to take the standard STAR method and upgrade it. I'm going to teach you how to answer the conflict question, not to show you how you won the battle, but how you saved the relationship and won the war. Let's get into it. Before we fix your answer, we have to diagnose why the typical approach fails. When I ask a candidate about conflict, I'm absolutely not interested in the technical details of the disagreement. I don't care if it was about coding standards, marketing budgets, or whose turn it was to buy donuts. I'm really testing for 3 specific things: emotional intelligence, de-escalation skills, and long-term strategic thinking. The trap candidates fall into is the Pyrrhic victory. In ancient history, a Pyrrhic victory was a battle won at such high cost that it amounted to a defeat. If your answer to the conflict question ends with, "So they finally agreed to do it my way, and we hit the deadline," you might have won the battle. But if that colleague now secretly hates working with you, you've lost the war. You have created organizational debt. As a leader, my biggest headache isn't missed deadlines. It's the interpersonal friction that grinds productivity to a halt. I need people who run toward the fire with a bucket of water and not a can of gasoline. So how do we fix this? We are still going to use the STAR method: situation, task, action, result, because it keeps you structured. But we are changing the lens. The lens is no longer problem solving. The lens is now relationship rescue. So let's start with situation or task. Set the stage quickly. Don't villainize the other person. Frame the conflict as a natural misalignment of valid business goals. Action. This is 70% of your answer. The action must focus on emotional regulation, active listening, and compromise. Result. The crucial pivot. The result is not just the business outcome. The result is the preserved or improved relationship. Let's break down the A and the R because that's where the meat of the matter really lies. When describing your actions, get the spotlight off yourself and onto the dynamic between the 2 humans in the room. Junior level answers sound like this: I scheduled a meeting. I presented my data. I explained why their approach wouldn't work. Notice the pattern? I talked, I explained, I proved. Let's try a different approach that sounds completely different and focuses on de-escalation. You want to use verbs like acknowledged, validated, listened, and aligned. Your action steps should show you did 3 things. 1, you regulated your own ego. You realized that being right was less important than moving forward together. 2, you sought to understand their pressure. Why were they pushing back? Were they under a different metric than you? 3, you created a third way. Not my way, not your path, but a new path that respects both parties and constraints. If your action section doesn't involve you saying something that echoes, I realized I needed to stop pushing my agenda and understand their constraints first. You aren't operating at the next level. Now the result. This is where you seal the deal. Most people stop too soon. They say, as a result, the project launched on time and under budget. Great, that's table stakes. You did your job. The gold bar is what happens the day after the project launched. Did that conflict create a scar or did it build muscle? Your result needs a two-part structure: the business win and the relationship win. It needs to sound like this. Yes, we hit the Q4 numbers, but more importantly, because we navigated that friction openly, Sarah and I developed a much stronger level of trust. We now have a shorthand for dealing with disagreements, and our last 3 projects have been our smoothest yet. That is what I want to hire. I want to hire someone who turns friction into fuel. Let's make this real. Let's take a classic corporate conflict, product versus sales. Let's say you're a product manager. Sales is screaming that they need a new feature yesterday to close a massive deal. You know that building that feature right now will derail the entire roadmap and burn out your engineering team. Here's the mediocre I won the argument answer. So the situation was sales wanted a feature that wasn't on the roadmap. My task was to protect the engineering team. So I set up a meeting with the sales VP and I used Jira data to show them that their request would push us back on our Q3 deliverables by 6 weeks. I stood my ground, explained the technical debt it would create, and eventually they backed down. The result was that we stayed on roadmap. I mean, you were technically right, but you just told me that you're rigid, you prioritize process over revenue, and you probably embarrassed that sales VP with data. You won the battle, but sales now thinks product is the department of no. Now let's hear this from a different perspective, the relationship rescue version. So, several years ago, as a lead PM, we faced a significant friction with sales. They needed a custom feature to close a whale of a client, but it wasn't on our roadmap and would have derailed our quarterly commitments to the board. The tension was high, and my initial instinct was to defend the roadmap with data. But I realized that if I just said no with a spreadsheet, I'd permanently damage the trust between product and sales. So the actions I took centered on alignment. I asked for a one-on-one with the sales director, not to debate the feature, but to understand the client's underlying pain point. I needed to validate the pressure they were under. I said, look, I understand this deal makes or breaks your quarter, and I want you to hit that number. So help me understand what the client actually needs to sign today versus what they need in 6 months. By listening rather than defending, we discovered that the client didn't need the full feature immediately. They needed a proof of concept integration, and so we compromised. Engineering agreed to a 3-day sprint for the proof of concept, a temporary detour, and sales agreed to manage client expectations for the full rollout. The result? We closed the deal. We missed one minor internal deadline, but we hit the revenue goal. But the real win was that the sales director and I established a hotline protocol. We agreed that the next time critical friction occurred, we'd jump on a call immediately to triage it together. Rather than letting it fester in emails, we turned a near disaster into a scalable process for handling future conflicts. Do you see the difference? The first person managed a project schedule. The second person managed organizational working relationships. When you're interviewing for any role, leadership or otherwise, your ability to do the technical work is assumed. What is not assumed is your ability to navigate the messy, emotional, ego-driven reality of human beings working together under pressure. Conflict isn't a cage match where you need to tap the other person out. It's a negotiation of values. When you prepare your star stories for your next interview, review them with a red pen. Cross out every time you talk about proving something and replace it with how you understood something. Ensure your ending highlights a stronger alliance, not just a finished task. Show me you can save the relationship, and I'll show you an offer letter. If you found this helpful, hit the like button so the algorithm knows you're into high-level career strategy. Subscribe if you want more of this executive coaching style and job hunting insights. Now, go out there and crush the interview. I'm rooting for you.